You know, almost every story you've ever heard about D-Day is a story of Allied victory. And those are absolutely vital stories of incredible courage and sacrifice. But today, we're going to flip the script. We're not looking at a story of victory. We're going to examine a blueprint for defeat. We're going to stand right there on the Atlantic Wall on the morning of June 6th, 1944, and we're going to look out through the binoculars of the men who watched an impossible, unbelievable reality sail right at them. This isn't just about what happened back then. It's a hard look at how a superpower can completely fall apart, not from one single blow, but from just fundamentally misunderstanding what power even is.
Just take a second and really put yourself there. Imagine it. You're a 32-year-old German officer, Oberleutnant Walter Ohmsen. You've been told your fortress, this Atlantic Wall, is completely impenetrable. You've been assured the enemy is disorganized, and besides, the weather makes any attack absolutely impossible. And then, through that early morning mist, you see this. Not ships, not even a fleet. It's like the ocean itself has just vanished, and it's been replaced by a single, unending, solid mass of steel. Ohmsen's words, they don't just describe a scene. They capture that precise, gut-wrenching moment when a man's entire worldview just shatters into a million pieces.
So let's put ourselves right in Ohmsen's boots at his command post, the Crisbeck Battery. It's 5 o'clock in the morning, and in a single glance, every piece of intelligence, every single assurance from the high command, it all just evaporates. The German leadership was so ridiculously confident that the famed Field Marshal Rommel wasn't even there. He was off in Germany celebrating his wife's birthday. They honestly believed the bad weather was their best defense. But that fantasy? Well, that fantasy was now sailing towards Ohmsen at 8 knots, and was about to become terrifyingly, horribly real.
But what's really fascinating here is that they weren't just paralyzed by shock. I mean, they fought back. Ohmsen's battery was one of the very first to act, and just an hour and a half later, at 6:30 a.m., they scored a direct hit. They sank the USS Corrie. It was a real testament to their training and their skill, a brief, lethal moment of effectiveness. But, it was like throwing a rock at a tidal wave. They won that one single exchange, but they were about to be completely erased by the brutal, cold mathematics of this war.
This chart right here, it just lays bare the massive disconnect. It's like the German high command was operating in a totally different universe. They expected, maybe 3,000 ships, and probably just for a small raid, a diversion. What actually showed up was nearly 7,000 vessels, the largest amphibious invasion ever put together in human history. This wasn't just a tactical surprise. It was a complete and utter failure of imagination. They were just incapable of even comprehending what their enemy could actually pull off.
So that initial shock on the beaches, it very quickly gave way to this horrifying new realization. This wasn't just a bigger army showing up. This was an entirely different kind of war. The German soldiers on the ground were about to learn a terrible lesson. They weren't just fighting other men. They were fighting the full, unrestrained, overwhelming power of an industrial superpower. They were fighting factories.
This quote from General Blumentritt, man, it gets right to the very heart of what the Germans were experiencing. I mean, think about what that really means. All your training, all your experience, your entire ideology built around the superior German soldier, all of it suddenly becomes secondary. Your courage doesn't really matter when you're up against an assembly line that can churn out tanks and planes and ships faster than you could ever hope to destroy them. This was the true, brutal lesson of D-Day. Warfare itself had fundamentally changed.
If you want to understand what fighting factories actually felt like on the ground, just look at this number. 178 tons of high explosives. And get this, that was fired by one American battleship, the USS Texas, in the first hour of the invasion. For a lot of the German artillery regiments on that coast, that was more ammunition than they had in their entire supply cache. You see, this wasn't a battle. It was an industrial process of annihilation, delivered from miles away.
And okay, if the sea was terrifying, the sky was just absolute. The picture this chart paints is just breathtaking. For every single German plane that managed to get into the air on D-Day, there were 46 Allied aircraft waiting for it. Now, for the German soldier on the ground, what did that mean? It meant any movement, any tank, any supply truck was just instantly vaporized from above. The sky itself had become enemy territory. There was nowhere to hide.
And here's a crucial point. It wasn't just about the sheer quantity of Allied machines. It was the whole philosophy behind how they were used. Over at Omaha Beach, American destroyers did something that was just unthinkable to the German military mind.
They deliberately sailed into shallow water, risking these huge multi-million-dollar warships just to get close enough to act like sniper rifles, blasting machine gun nests one by one. To the Germans, who had to hoard every single precious ship they had, this was pure madness. But to the Americans, a destroyer was just another tool from the toolbox. If you lose one, well, the factories back home will just build another one. It was an endless supply.
This industrial avalanche, it didn't just break the German lines on the beach. It broke German minds. The physical defeat on the battlefield started this much deeper psychological collapse. Because everything they had been taught, everything they believed about their own superiority, was being proven catastrophically wrong right in front of their eyes.
I mean, listen to this. This is the raw, unfiltered voice of pure despair coming from the very top. Field Marshal von Rundstedt, the commander-in-chief in the West, he gets a call from Berlin asking what they should do, and he just screams this down the phone line. "Make peace, you fools!" It was the simple, brutal truth. And for daring to speak that truth, he was fired on the spot. That right there shows you the complete fracture between the reality in France and the absolute fantasy world of Hitler's headquarters.
And then, less than 2 weeks later, Rommel himself flies to meet with Hitler. He lays out the cold, hard facts. The Allies have total control of the sky. His elite panzer tanks literally cannot move during the day without being destroyed. His divisions are at 30% strength. He presented this clear, logical, undeniable case for why the battle was lost. And Hitler's response? It was a simple order. Forbid any retreat. Stand and die. Right there, in that moment, the war stopped being about strategy and it became about pure ideology, completely detached from any kind of reality.
And this is the truly tragic outcome of that ideological collapse. For many of these German officers, they'd been told their whole lives that Americans were soft, decadent, and couldn't handle a real fight. Instead, they met an enemy that used bulldozers to clear roads of their wrecked panzer tanks. The shock wasn't just about losing a battle. It was the realization that their entire worldview, that core belief in their own superiority, was a complete lie. And for some, that profound disillusionment was a blow they just couldn't survive.
So, what's the ultimate lesson here? What's the big takeaway from this blueprint of defeat? Why does looking at D-Day from this side offer such a powerful lesson for us today? Well, because the German experience gives us this timeless, chillingly clear understanding of what true national power actually looks like. It's a lesson that's not written in books, but in steel.
Just forget tactics for a second and just look at the raw numbers. In 1944, the United States, by itself, outproduced Germany in every single critical category. But look closer. Look at the number for trucks. Nearly 10 times the output. You know, wars aren't just won by flashy tanks and planes, they're won by logistics. They are won by the humble truck that gets the fuel and the ammo to the front line. As one of their own generals later said, the Germans were, quite simply, mathematically eliminated.
And if you need one single perfect symbol of this industrial genius, it's the Mulberry Harbors. The entire German defense strategy for France was built around defending the major ports. So what did the Allies do? They didn't bother capturing a port. Oh no, they built 2 of their own in England and towed them across the English Channel. This was problem solving on a scale that German command literally could not even imagine. It completely subverted the very logic of warfare they were prepared for.
And so we come back to the man on the cliff, Walter Ohmsen. 40 years later, he stood at his old command post, and his reflection is really the final definitive word on all of this. He said it wasn't about better soldiers or smarter generals. It was about production. The armada he saw that day wasn't just a fleet of ships. It was, in his own words, American industrial might made visible. So, the crucial point we need to take away is this. The German army in Normandy did not lack for courage. They didn't lack for skill. What they lacked was everything else. Theirs was not a failure of courage, but a shortage of trucks. It wasn't a tactical defeat, but an industrial one. Ultimately, it wasn't even military. It was mathematical.
And that really leaves us with this final, critical thought. The lesson of D-Day, seen through German eyes, it echoes so loudly in our world today. When we look at global power now, whether it's in military standoffs or economic rivalries, are we making that same mistake? Are we too focused on the soldiers, the fighter jets, the visible symbols of strength? Or should we be looking deeper, at the industrial base, the logistical capacity, the simple, brutal mathematics of production? The blueprint of 1944 suggests the answer to that question is everything.